Hello, everybody. Welcome to Funnel 3. I am John Roeland. I am a organizer and a presenter at this year's Funnel Conference. My presentation today is called Cosmosophy, the wisdom of the cosmos. My presentation is about how everything is one, about unity consciousness, about human consciousness, about reality, about meaning, about objective and subjective. Cosmology is the study of the cosmos or the study of the all. It's that ultimate sense of looking without at the universe and considering who or what is it? Who or what created it? Was it created? Can something exist without being created? It also involves looking within and considering who and what are we? Where are we? Why are we? Who am I? What am I? What, if any, are the limits of what we can know about the cosmos? So, as we look at the cosmos throughout time, we develop our cosmology and we derive our cosmosophy. Contemplating the cosmos, understanding its order, and aligning your actions with it is a human's highest achievement. It is the essence of spiritual development. Before we begin, some things you should know. First of all, I'm an eternal optimist. I remember being a child at church, hearing all the doomsday about Armageddon and the end of the world. And I remember as a kid even thinking, well, we're still here for a reason, right? Even though apparently we're destined to a fiery ending, we're still here for a reason. So maybe God still wants us to make it better. And in my simple childhood mind, I already had that attitude. And in all honesty, I've maintained that attitude. The other side of that is if it's to watch it all burn, if that's why we're here, well, what better time to be alive? You know, I mean, there'd be other good times in history to live your life. And excuse me, I'm sure we've all been there. You know, at some point we lived through the different eons, the different ages, the different centuries, the different millennia. And so we've seen it. It's stored in our DNA, it's stored in the astral plane. So, what better time to be physically alive here than to experience whatever is to come? You know, will we pull ourselves out of this or will we watch it burn? Second, breathe. Empty your mind and prepare for reception. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Don't be a mouth breather. They want us to be mouth breathers. Next, after all of the research I have done, I have realized that no one has it 100% correct, and seemingly no one agrees with anyone else 100%. So share your unique perspective. It's important. It's what we're here to do. Know that you don't know, and you can never know the absolute. Or can you? Knowledge and belief. They're two sides to the same coin from my perspective. And there is an importance of embracing both concepts. Knowing something, experiencing something, knowing it for yourself, how to prove that you know something is very difficult in this world. Objective is always slightly out of reach, but yet there's clues to the objectivity of the world, the absoluteness of the world. There's clues there that tell us and that lead us to believe and keep us searching for that. Whatever you think you know right now forms your belief about the world. And that goes back and forth. It's good to have beliefs about what the world is. It's good to draw conclusions based off of what you know. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Also, know the power of your belief. The power of your belief can shape the world. If you don't think that's true after these last 3 years, then you're not paying attention. If there's any more, definitive sign of the power of the control of the state and of the culture over your mind, the face coverings, the gloves, these are people were not doing this prior to 2020. And so, believing in things make it real. I gave a ride to a woman doing Uber. She was a very wise woman. We had a really nice discussion on our trip. And she said to me, I tell my kids, if you can think it, it exists. And that's absolutely true. If you believe in a spiritual realm, you believe in spiritual energies. And if you don't believe in spiritual energies, think about a thought. What is that? It's an invisible thing, but it's a real energy, and you put that energy out there, and that shapes the world. So embrace knowledge and belief. Try to know as much as you can. Always strive to know, and then form your beliefs and share them with others of how you see things. Absolute reality and manifested reality, something we'll get into a little bit. You have the absolute reality, which is the whole thing, the objective reality of which, is ultimately the truth of everything. And then you have the manifested reality, which is basically everything in the cosmos, which is subjective in the sense that it's constantly changing. And it's not permanent in the form that it's in. So the patterns that are observed through the matter of the subjective manifested realm point to an objective absolute reality that we seem to just not be able to grasp. Or can we? Entertain thoughts. It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it or rejecting it. And I've gone into this, that quote has been changed quite a bit, but the premise rings true. Be open-minded, be willing to take in different ideas and consider them, ponder them. What's wrong? What's wrong with taking on a different perspective from time to time? And that's really what we should be doing. It's a big part of what the Trivium is about. The duality of meaning, the meaning of meaning. The word mean means average, right? The middle point between two opposing poles, right? So a word is not negative or positive. It's just like a tool. Depends on how it's being used. For example, the word government. The word government has a negative connotation in the modern sense of the word. And you're talking about the institution of government. The word government means mind control. So now you're talking about an institution using mind control to control the public. But the positive connotation of government is you having mind control over yourself. And in reality, that's the only thing you have control over. And it is the one thing that you can prevent other people eventually from having control over. Excuse me. We all influence each other through our government, through our mind control. We control our own minds. And then when we cooperate with others to build a community, make agreements, we have to use mind control there, because we have to control ourselves to live up to the agreements that we made, control our minds to express how we want things different, and then negotiate, come to compromises. So the meaning of meaning is, for me, finding that sense of the word where it seems like such a negative government seems like such a bad thing, but if we shift that and use the positive connotation of the word, we should be rejoicing in our mind control. And it's the one place we really are allowed to express our will and our freedom. And remember that evil is just live backwards, right? So you're just, you're just kind of working with that opposite force, evolution and involution. But these two forces, again, when you get into occult ideas like the Hermetic principles, it's just two ends of the same spectrum, the same pole. Finally, in this little list of caveats, everyone is controlled opposition until no one is. We have to embrace this fact, especially on the metaverse. But in reality, even prior to the metaverse, I mean, if you were a Black Panther in the 70s, you had people literally infiltrating your group, infiltrating your families, and reporting on you. And when I say everyone is controlled opposition until no one is, what I mean by that is a couple of things. One, we don't know who's controlled opposition. So we may be following somebody, and now that makes us controlled opposition ourselves. And so until those people who are acting as agents and acting as controlled opposition, until they change, then nothing will change, because we'll constantly be having to deal with that on some level. So the ultimate point is we have to help change those people too, right? And we talked about this in our group the other day. I think we heard it from James Corbett, but principles, not people. So you can take the good from anybody. Pretty much everybody has some good qualities, some good ideas. Even the most evil person you could think of, you could probably discern some good out of that. So in beginning, a creation story. What would you do if you were God before creation? You are all-knowing and all-powerful. You have no peers. There is no one to share your omniscience and omnipotence with. So you decide to play a game, the game of creation. You emanate and create as much as possible. You create for infinity or eternity. You give all of your creations amnesia so they forget that they are God. This gives them a sense of free will and initiates a cosmic game of hide and seek. And the point of the game is for the emanations of creation to eventually return to God by realizing and remembering that they are all one. Once they return to the all, the game is over until you, God, decide to play again. 30 years ago, I discovered this creation story in a book called The Wisdom of the Yi Jing at my friend's house on his father's bookshelf. The Yi Jing is one of the oldest books from China. It survived the burning of the books in China. And Yi Jing means the book of changes. This book is actually an oracle. And as you can see there on the screen, there's 64 hexagrams, but these hexagrams are lined up on top of each other. And they're either made up of a solid line or a broken line. So the first symbol is 6 solid lines, and that symbol represents heaven. The second symbol is 6 broken lines, and that symbol represents earth. And from there, the myriad of things are created. It ends up with 64 symbols. And interesting fact about this, when I found this book and I was reading through it, it was kind of like a poetry book almost. It wasn't actually the I Ching, but it did explain a little bit of what the I Ching was, which back then I didn't really understand very well. 30 years ago, I would have been 17 years old. And it explained in there that this code of solid line, broken line, solid line, broken line, if you replace it with zeros and ones, it's the binary system. And that binary system runs all computers. So I found that fascinating, that this ancient wisdom book from China had the code that eventually would create computers. So makes you think that there's something going on there, some type of synchronistic connection there between this book and the universe and technology. There's connections. Creation stories like this and occult texts like the I Ching are two important parts of an individual's cosmology. Cosmology is the study of the cosmos. So let's look at the etymology of the word cosmos. Cosmos, noun, circa 1200. The universe, the world, from Latinized form of Greek kosmos, order, good order, orderly arrangement, a word with several main senses rooted in those notions. The verb kosmein meant generally to dispose, prepare, but especially to order and arrange troops for battle, to set an army in array, also to establish a government or regime, to deck, adorn, equip, dress, especially of women. Thus, cosmos had an important secondary sense of ornaments of a woman's dress, decoration. Compare cosmocomus, dressing the hair, probably where comb comes from, and cosmetic, as well as the universe or the world. So here you see that they're talking about, dressing and, dressing the universe ultimately. Like, what is the universe being adorned with? What is creation manifesting, right? And the fact that they compare it to a woman is kind of telling, because that space part of creation is always kind of considered to be feminine, the feminine aspect, and the impulse to create and to interact with that matter would be considered the masculine principle there. Pythagoras is said to have been the first to apply this word to the universe, perhaps originally meaning the starry firmament, which makes sense because the starry firmament looks like a decorated dress in itself, like a jeweled sky, but it later was extended to the whole physical world, including the earth. For specific reference to the world of people, the classical phrase was he oikoumeni, the inhabited earth. I don't speak Greek. Cosmos was also used in Christian religious writing with a sense of worldly life, this world, as opposed to the afterlife. But the more frequent word for this was aeon, literally lifetime or age. So again, this is looking at the manifested reality we're in, not necessarily being to go beyond that. But again, the human mind is capable of considering what's outside of that boundary, if anything. And again, this is that practice of, considering what the cosmos are and what our place is in it. The word cosmos often suggested especially the universe as an embodiment of order and harmony, also from circa 1200. So we're looking for order and harmony in the universe. Cosmology is the scientific study of the origin, evolution, and eventual fate of the universe. Two types of cosmology that you will deal with is a metaphysical cosmology and a physical cosmology. So a cosmology you can touch and a cosmology that's beyond your touch. From Wikipedia, religious or mythological cosmology is a body of beliefs based on mythological, religious, and esoteric literature and traditions of creation myths and eschatology. Eschatology being end of the world myths. In the science of astronomy, cosmology is concerned with the study of the chronology of the universe. Physical cosmology is the study of the observable universe's origin, its large-scale structures and dynamics, and the ultimate fate of the universe, including the laws of science that govern these areas. Just want to point out that, ancient cosmologies were mostly non-physical cosmologies. Not that they didn't think that there were physical items out there in the stars or out, in space, but that they definitely didn't have any idea of being able to touch it. These were all metaphysical ideas. It is investigated by scientists, including astronomers and physicists, as well as philosophers, such as metaphysicians, philosophers of physics, and philosophers of space and time. Because of this shared scope with philosophy, theories in physical cosmology may include both scientific and non-scientific propositions, and may depend upon assumptions that cannot be tested. Physical cosmology is a sub-branch of astronomy that is concerned with the universe as a whole. Modern physical cosmology is dominated by the Big Bang theory, which attempts to bring together observational astronomy and particle physics. Theoretical astrophysicist David N. Spergel has described cosmology as a historical science because when we look out in space, we look back in time. We bind back due to the finite nature of the speed of light. Metaphysical cosmology has also been described as the placing of humans in the universe in relationship to all other entities. This is exemplified by Marcus Aurelius's observation of a man's place in that relationship. Quote, "He who does not know what the world is does not know where he is, and he who does not know for what purpose the world exists does not know who he is nor what the world is." So how do we study the metaphysical cosmos? We start from where we are in our body, soul, and mind, and through our consciousness. Your consciousness is first affected by your family. Who were you born to? What type of comfort and safety they're providing for you. I used to work in childcare, and I saw kids that were adopted and that had no one really caring for them. And those kids were really messed up at a really early age. And obviously, that's going to affect your consciousness. So, very important to think about that when you're starting to raise a kid and, supporting their healthy consciousness. The state. The state pretty much intervenes on you. I was born in 1976, and I was touched by the state. Where did he touch you? Um, Nowadays, I mean, you can't really participate in society without being touched by the state in some form or fashion. So before you even get into the school system, the state already has an influence on you, obviously. And so that is going to affect your consciousness. It's sort of like an extended family, extended parent, right? Sitting there telling you no, telling you what you can and can't do, making you think twice about things, maybe telling you not to ask questions. Hopefully your family is telling you to ask questions. I think I was blessed with that. Religion. Religion comes in pretty early for most of us. Religion comes from a Latin religare, to bind fast, via the notion of place an obligation on or bond between humans and gods. Again, getting into the dual meaning of a word here, true religion is to bind back to the Creator. Part of the understanding of the cosmos is through binding back mentally and spiritually in order to comprehend the nature of the all. This is where the impulse towards spiritual development comes from. Our desire to know, and then to flow, or to glow. We don't know for sure. False religion is when you bind back and you don't go far enough. There are many, many false gods to bind back to. and get stuck on upon your journey. The 9th century Chinese Buddhist monk Linji Yixuan famously told his disciples, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, because that's not your enlightenment. Your enlightenment is not going to be found by some Buddha on the road telling you that you've reached enlightenment. The journey continues on until you actually get there, and you're most likely not going to get there in a lifetime. But we're all working at it. We'll all get there together, once we all figure out that we're God. I was raised in a cosmos where most of the people I knew were taught that the creator was a man in the sky who created the cosmos and was often disappointed in humans and punished us for engaging in our base natural desires that he gave us. Then he sent us a savior who had to die for how evil we were. And eventually the world will end in a fiery war with all the higher forces in the heavens battling it out. But the savior side will win, and the saved souls will get to live in paradise for a certain amount of time. And then I guess it starts all over again. Most of us awaken at some point to question this narrative. On some level, we all question it, even the believers. This is where discernment begins to develop. Do you reject the whole thing, or is there some value to this most influential book and story? My personal journey led me to keep certain aspects that I found positive. I didn't throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater. I had actual spiritual, mystical experiences facilitated through this religion, this church. I remember being at church camp and, singing and praying and all that, and like really feeling a heightened spiritual energy there. Later I kind of realized that like if you get people together and you put that energy out, I mean, you could be focused on anything, but I definitely felt something. Jesus as the role model, looking at Jesus not as like your God and Savior, but as a person showing you the way to live. Jesus saying that we can achieve the same and more, meaning that he wasn't a God, he wasn't special. We could all achieve this. And maybe he had to strive to get there some way, which they occult from us. They leave out the whole story of how he developed these skills. But then finally, Jesus as a healer. I mean, the whole point of the story is Jesus healing people and, getting people to believe that they can heal themselves, that they're more than just this physical body that's breaking down and holding them back. Also, this book, the Bible, has obviously had a huge impact on the trajectory of the world. Therefore, it must hold a value to investigate it just based off of that fact alone. So I wouldn't disregard the whole thing, even though a lot of people that I knew and I grew up with, they did. And they basically became atheists, became anti-spiritual, which I think is probably part of the reason why you have such a, corrupt and messed up religion like that, is to turn people off completely and, kind of like not inspire them to use their discernment. Their discernment is telling them, oh, this thing's terrible. These people are abusing children. They're starting wars. I'm going to discredit the whole thing, disregard the whole thing. I never did that. Modern physical cosmology, this is what we're told is the nature of our planet, where we live, our planet, the other planets in the solar system. We're going around the sun. We're spinning crazy speeds. We can touch these other planets in some physical way. They tell us, we went to the moon. They tell us, we're vast, far, far away, spreading apart, going further and further away from each other. I remember hearing that, maybe at some point, if it goes far enough, it might collapse on itself. Or it might just go forever till we're just in the dark. A lot of things kind of hard to fathom, but This is the modern physical cosmology that we're given, and it's very influential on our consciousness. I mean, especially you look through, mainstream media, Star Wars. It's one of the first movies I remember seeing. I was way into that stuff. I remember imagining as a kid that I was going to build a Millennium Falcon and I was going to bury it underground. I was going to have it underground in like an underground cavern and be able to like fly, take off, go to space, all that stuff. I really remember thinking about that. And I think I started digging a hole. But, kids, man, kids' minds are amazing, right? It's so funny to think about that stuff. Other factors influencing consciousness, mainstream culture and media. I mean, man, I remember laying in bed trying to go to sleep and hearing the freaking news in the background. You can't get that stuff out of your head on some level. Radio's constantly going, commercials, clothes, toys, news, just constant bombardment from this signal of mainstream culture through advertising, through peers, through school. Speaking of school, the next one I have here is public education, right? Again, you're influenced by your peers, the way that they run public education. That's a whole presentation in itself. Shout out David Rodriguez. Shout out Dana Martin. Shout out Will Keller. The public education system has a lot, leaves a lot to be desired. Definitely there to make you a good citizen, kind of teach you bad habits. Some people can, succeed in there, and that's fine. But, in general, I think it probably leads to more problems than good. Along with the public education system comes this scientism where basically everything's kind of solved, and you listen to the experts and you regurgitate the correct answer. Not a lot of stimulation in thinking in terms of the trivium and discernment. And in world history, we have a certain narrative of world history that we get fed to us over and over again, mostly just the history of our country. They do a terrible job of teaching the actual history of the world. And then another influence on consciousness is mind-altering drugs. These things can open you up to different aspects of yourself, different aspects of reality that you didn't see there before, you didn't think about before. This could be with things as simple as marijuana, and then things a little more intense like shrooms and LSD and all different kinds of mind-altering drugs. I really think every drug is a mind-altering drug. They just kind of serve different purposes. Even alcohol, when I drank it as a kid, I remember it being like a mind-altering substance to an extent. That ends pretty quickly, though. The history of religion, the syncretism between the beliefs of different people in the world. This was a journey that I went on, like right when I got out of high school. What did I want to learn about on my own? I wanted to learn about the different world religions. And that, for me, that syncretism of all the different religions leads me to a higher sense of spirituality, which eventually led me to occultism and the understanding of what occultism is. I never would have really considered a book like the Yi Jing an occult book, but clearly it is. So I was reading those things, but I wasn't necessarily considering it the occult until really rather recently, and understanding what the occult is in general. Also, coincidences and synchronicities. When I was in high school, we used to call them the omens, little things that happen that like there's some connection to them. And the idea of the word coincidence, two connected incidences, that the modern connotation is to say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. It's just random. But in reality, it's just two coinciding events. And, if you realize that this is a sign of synchronicity, you do raise your consciousness and you start seeing it as a sign from the universe. Like, to me, when I see those little synchronistic things throughout my life, that has shown me or made me believe that there is a God. There is something deeper going on here. And so there's a book that I read probably in my early 20s, late teens, called The Celestine Prophecy. Pretty famous New Age book, but that's one of the first concepts they get into, is that these coincidences matter and that they're for a reason, not to just say, oh, it's just a coincidence. No, I thought of that person, I run into that person, there's maybe a reason for me to talk to that person. And so then this leads into pattern recognition. As you get older, you start recognizing patterns in society, and that starts to teach you about the nature of reality and how the world works. And that pattern recognition hopefully gets stronger as you get older, and you can continue developing it. And as you continue developing that pattern recognition, you keep asking, just like Marvin Gaye asked, what's going on? What's going on? In my search through the world religions, one that I found that I connected with right away was Taoism. Turns out Taoism is connected to the I Ching, both coming out of China. Taoism was written by a man named Lao Tzu, who legend says was the reader of the I Ching, the diviner of the I Ching for the empire. And as he was leaving the empire because it was collapsing, some guard asked him, share your wisdom with us. And so Lao Tzu sat down and wrote this book. And from chapter 1 of the Tao, the Way, the book of the Way, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of myriad things. Thus, constantly, without desire, one observes its essence. Constantly, with desire, one observes its manifestations. These two emerge together but differ in name. The unity is said to be the mystery. Mystery of mysteries, the door to all wonders. So again, connecting it to the I Ching, right? The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. So, you can't really comprehend God, but from God comes heaven and earth. And what does the Bible say? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Oh, see some syncretism there, right? The named is the mother. Again, we adorn the mother, right? The named things that you can see is the mother of myriad things. So heaven and earth is the mother of myriad things. Nature is the mother of myriad things, right? Without desire, you observe its essence. So if you can rid yourself of desire, you can see the whole thing in its unity consciousness, in its oneness. But with your desire, you observe the separateness and the manifestations of it. These two emerge together, but differ in name. The unity is said to be the mystery of mysteries, the door to all wonders. This gets you on your path to seeking the mysteries. Consciousness is connected with conspiracy and searching for understanding in the world. Conspiracy theories pull you in, at least for me, pull me in, pretty early. I always knew there was something wrong with the Kennedy story. And, I knew my mom was a big fan of the Kennedys just through osmosis. You could, the way they talked about them. And I used to ask her, well, why don't you care about what actually happened? And my mom would say, well, what can I do? Right. And, that was more the attitude back then, but I was a young buck, wanting to do something about it. Who really did that? Let's figure it out. What happened? It's clearly wasn't some guy hanging out of a window. It obviously didn't make any sense, but that kind of opens the door for you. The moon landing, not one I looked into early on, but one again that I always sensed there was something wrong with. Didn't seem legitimate. But again, early on, didn't really look into it. The bushes, why were the bushes so powerful? Why did they get away with so much? I remember, just delving into that towards the end of high school, getting closer to the year 2000, but kind of knowing that George H.W. Bush, bad guy. 420, not talking about smoking weed. I'm talking about the date 420, Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City, Columbine, a bunch of events in the 90s that all seem to be, orchestrated. And again, your pattern recognition starts picking these up. Back then, it wasn't as intense, but you knew something was wrong with these stories. Then the big one, 9/11, which again, even for me, I didn't wake up to it right away. I kind of fell into a little bit of a trance, I think, initially after 9/11, and then from a political standpoint and a reaction standpoint to 9/11, I definitely thought we were on the wrong path in terms of like, oh, let's go to war over this, like, but 9/11 starts to wake you up. A few years after 9/11, I was handed a book from a friend by David Icke called "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." There, David Icke kind of lays out a different narrative, right? He gives you a glimpse into a narrative where, these things are all controlled, and the way they do it through problem, reaction, solution, which is ultimately the Hegelian dialectic, which is ultimately the trivium, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? Peanut butter, jelly, peanut butter and jelly, right? And so, how do they run this world? Through the problem, reaction, solution, through their secret societies. You get a little glimpse into that. Alex Jones, kind of the beginning of the mainstreaming of conspiracy, chemtrails, human trafficking, big pharma. Obviously, I could go deeper, but these are kind of the main ones. One little quick focus I wanted to shine a light on is two authors, Bill Cooper and Annie Jacobsen. Bill Cooper, kind of the godfather of the modern conspiracy movement, worked for U.S. Naval Intelligence, getting information about UFOs. He came to the realization that this was misinformation being given to him in order that he would somehow spread this idea that there was all these UFO sightings, and that he ultimately came to the conclusion that there was some sort of plot in place to make people believe that there was all this UFO activity in order to eventually fake an alien invasion in order to gain more control over the people and implement a one world government and religion. And this led him to look into who these people are, what they believe, and try to understand them and like be able to resist them by understanding, what their thought process is. And so he did a whole series on the occult and the different secret societies, what they believe in, and their different rituals. So, but interesting, aspect of him is that, he sort of shined a light on, some of the misinformation coming out from this alien UFO narrative that, beings are coming from outer space. And Annie Jacobsen is an author who her first book is Area 51. And Area 51 gets into not the UFO aspect of Area 51 a little bit, but mostly focused on what was actually going on at Area 51, which was military, airplanes, spy planes, technology. It was really the competition between the US and Russia, who had taken Nazi scientists and basically split them up. And that basically led to the Cold War. And most of what was going on at Area 51 was spying between Russia and the US. And at the end of that book, she mentions an interview with a man who was there during Roswell, and that he claimed in this interview with her that the flying saucers that they recovered had Russian writing on them, and that the beings that came out were actually human, but they had been deformed and like basically like genetically modified, physically modified. Think Joseph Mengele type experiments. The idea was that Russia had actually put these young beings into these UFOs, flew them over the United States, crashed them in order to create a frenzy. So apparently they got the idea from the War of the Worlds and the fact that people went crazy in America over that radio show. Russia saw that as something they could take advantage of. But Annie Jacobsen's book, she also does Project Paperclip, the Pentagon's Brain, about DARPA. phenomenon about the research into astral voyaging and things like that. But again, those both found kind of interesting because they both sort of shined a light on the false information coming out about UFOs and things of that nature coming from other planets, things like that. But what do we ultimately learn from going down all of these rabbit holes of conspiracy? We learn that we have been lied to about almost everything, and what we have believed about the world is mostly false. The reason why world leaders lie to us is to maintain mind control over us. They want to keep us reliant on them. Excuse me. This is done by disconnecting us from our true nature, by distorting reality and the understanding of the cosmos, thus resulting in us turning to false government to solve our problems. We also learn that we need to take accountability and re-engage with the world in order to understand the reality of what's going on. We have to rediscover the truth that has been obfuscated and realize that our choices have been negatively influenced by bad information and have helped to perpetuate the problem that we have in this world, which is people enslaving us without our consent. We have to start making better choices that protect the sovereignty of those who want to step into their true selves. We also feel the responsibility to inform others of the truth in order to encourage them to explore their own sovereignty, and so they respect the sovereignty of others as well. Also, from connecting consciousness and conspiracy is that you learn about natural law, morality, and occultism, and the fact that there is moral laws in the universe that show us that we should behave in a positive way. And that moral law in a moral way. And that moral law, from my perception, comes from humans, in the sense that we are the ones that are facilitating it. We are the ones that it's what we're here to do. We have the system of morality built within us. You know, the system of morality is an angel on your shoulder and a devil on your shoulder. And so if you're using that system of morality to find the meaning, to find the solution, the middle way, the middle path between those two poles, you are using morality. That's a moral decision. Even something that could end up being harmful could technically be moral if you put it through the process. So that's my take on it. And then occultism, is really just the study of the spiritual realm. Occult means to hide or hidden from, from the eye. But, in thinking, again, dual meanings, yes, the information is hidden from us, but also the information itself is hidden. It's invisible. It's spiritual. So it's already occulted by nature. The spirit is occulted by nature. The spirit is something you sense that you recognize the pattern of it, and you recognize the synchronicity, and that's how you understand the spiritual realm. But it has been occulted from us, and that's kind of the mystery of it all, isn't it? But again, the dual meaning, you could also look at it as that information is then actually hid from us by the people who have it, right? Heed these words, you who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders? In you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. This is why I started with consciousness. This is where we begin, from the natural realm, and we raise up higher. But we begin from ourselves, our own consciousness. You want to have a good foundation there as you work your way up into the higher realms and understandings. After getting through all of that portion of my experience, delving into consciousness and conspiracy, and then opening my mind up to the occult by learning about natural law and from content creators like Mark Passio, who really opened me up to the idea of the occult, and that it's not something scary. You can get into it. The one occult person that I wanted to get into at that time was Rudolf Steiner. Man, I've listened to hours and hours of audio of Rudolf Steiner. He did an amazing job of documenting his work. He has really great just philosophical work on his own in his early years, but then he goes into his esoteric and occult knowledge, talk about a syncretist. I mean, he basically can talk about any religion and show you the occult significance. One thing I really want to talk about with Steiner is an alternative narrative of history, where instead of the evolution of us as a biological species, he talks about evolution of ages, of times where we were more spiritual beings in the past. And then, now it's basically kind of describing the fall of man into the material realm. And now we find ourselves deeper into this material realm. But what's great about Steiner is he's always kind of trying to show you like why this, is necessary for this time. There is a reason why we need to fall into the material realm. It's part of our journey. And he talks about two forces that are constantly working on us: the Luciferic forces, which are the spiritual forces trying to pull us up out of the material realm, to go join them in the heights, of the spirit realms. And then there are the Ahrimanic forces, which pull us down to the lower realms, down to the material. We are in an Ahrimanic age, which has become very material. We've moved away from spiritual ideas. You can see this in a lot of different areas. You see it in religion, Christianity. They wanted to remove spirituality from that book. Obviously, science is really scientism removes the idea of the ether, a spirit realm, energy realms. They want to make everything a mechanistic process of biology. And so Steiner ends up, he was influenced by theosophy, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But he, clearly had his own ideas already. I think the Theosophical Society helped him to kind of shape, his understanding of the different realms. But, he speaks about these different levels of spirit realms and different levels of spiritual beings. And what's good about Steiner, too, is he kind of goes back and forth from anthropomorphizing those beings, but also, talking about them as impulses that we feel and impulses that affect us. And he wants to, really establish the importance of understanding these spiritual realities that have these effects on us, and that it's going to be hard to survive in the world and create, a world of alignment with nature if we're not aware of these spirit realms and we act like they're not affecting us. So that's my little spiel on Steiner. There'll be more on him in a few minutes. Theosophy, basically, H.P. Blavatsky in 1888 put out the book The Secret Doctrine. And here I'm going to get into a little reading of hers, which kind of touches on sort of another creation story. The first proposition: an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of thought. In the words of Mandukya, unthinkable and unspeakable. That is the absolute, right? To render these ideas clear to the general reader, let him set out with the postulate that there is one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. This infinite and eternal cause dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is, of course, devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being. It is beingness rather than being, in Sanskrit, sat, and is beyond all thought or speculation. This beingness is symbolized in the secret doctrine under two aspects. On the one hand, absolute abstract space, representing bare subjectivity, the one thing which no human mind can either exclude from any conception or conceive of by itself. On the other, absolute abstract motion, representing unconditioned consciousness. Even our Western thinkers have shown that consciousness is inconceivable to us apart from change, and motion best symbolizes change, its essential characteristic. This latter aspect of the one reality is also symbolized by the term the great breath, a symbol sufficiently graphic to need no further elucidation. So she's describing everything starting from this unnameable, unthinkable thing that's immutable, doesn't change. This is the objective reality. And then when it starts creating the manifested reality, this is the manifested conditioned being. And this is the one thing that we can't, we can't really imagine, the absolute, but we can look at the manifested reality, and we can divine the absolute through the manifested reality. That's my take on it. But anyway, just wanted to touch on a little bit of theosophy and Rudolf Steiner. The Bhagavad Gita, the secret doctrine was taken from Hindu ideas, and very much related to Hindu spiritual beliefs. And even though the book, Madame Blavatsky channeled that book, it's not a book that you can read. At the time when I was learning about natural law and coming to the understanding of that philosophy, that there is moral laws in the world, and that how we behave is how the world gets created. I was also reading about the Bhagavad Gita, and in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is having a discussion with Arjuna, and Krishna is the God, and Arjuna asks him to show him his real self. And here he shows him his real self, and he expands outward into the whole universe, and he sees Krishna as the whole universe, as the supreme being. And this led me to realize that natural law is showing you the process of the cosmos, how the cosmos works. But my mind was kind of going to this idea of, what does it look like? What is the cosmos, right? And I created the idea of the Nus, the natural universal spirit. It has three aspects. It has the nature, the material realm, the universe, which is the whole containment of everything, and the spirit, which drives everything. So the universe is sort of like the oneness of it all. The two aspects of that oneness is nature and spirit. So the natural universal spirit, I call it the Nus. This is my own idea, going into this, but again, it's related to other people's idea. It's just my creative way of putting it. It's nothing new. Natural universal spirit is another expression of the Trivium and the Trinity, right? In the same way of the absolute and the manifested reality coming from the beingness in theosophy, right? The heaven and the earth, being created. And then once those things are created, then another, the trivium is created when you get to that synthesis of those two things. And from those three things come the myriad of creation. So just wanted to share this. And the interesting story about the Nus is, as I was putting out some content with this concept in mind, the natural universal spirit, someone said to me, "Do you mean the noose?" And I said, "The noose? What's that?" So I look up the noose, and the noose is basically the idea of this initial spirit. It's like the outside realm of this containment. and it's the spirit that sort of penetrates everything, and it's where noumena comes from. So it's the idea that like this realm of ideas and concepts and potentialities that gets manifested, that it exists in a mind, the nous, that and again go along with the 7 hermetic principles, which again you learn through occultism. The all is mind, right? Turns out the nous is basically the same concept that I had with the natural universal spirit, that you can breathe it in. It's we're all a part of it. We're individuals within it, but if we can imagine ourselves as all one part of it, then we can tap into it. So I found the nous fascinating. We can tap into the nous, similar to the like Akashic records again. And from there, from the nous, we manifest the noumena. We manifest these things that exist in potential and exist in ideas. And if you can think it, it exists, right? Even if you don't manifest it. But yeah, it's like this, our connection to that universal mind. And I do think it's part of what makes humans special, at least here on this realm where we are. We seem to be the only beings that can be able to do that. Not that I think we are. I think the higher realms can do something like that, but I don't know that they could bring it into manifestation the way we can, because we're definitely in the realm where we're in between the spirit and the matter. Now, funny that the nous, and the news which they feed us, right, is a second signal that they're feeding us. So instead of that original natural spirit that we're taking in and we're using to create reality, now we're getting this bombardment of the news, right, which is a false signal, which causes us to turn away from the natural symbol and create the world that we have now. And so we got to turn off that signal, kind of like the movie They Live. They got to knock that signal out. Through the nous, I came up with the concepts of truth discovery, the discernment principle, and spiritual development. Ultimately, this is how do we, cut through the noise. And these are 3 basic principles that, like, truth discovery is the one thing that we desire to do as humans. A lot of people turn it off, but the people that are listening to me right now, I know most of you are on a constant, striving to find truth and to get away from that false message and find the true message. So truth discovery, and then the discernment principle, that it's actually the nature of humans to discern. And the discernment is actually morality. Discernment is this process of the trivium. It's like, go, don't go, and then you make your decision, left, right, down the middle, the devil and the angel on your shoulder, and you have to discern and like make the right decision. And through that process, you develop a better morality. You work on that process. You understand, like, we're all trying to make the world a better place ultimately, or we should be. And our moral system that's built in us is telling us that on some level, even if it's broken in some people. There's got to be a sense of, wanting to discern what's right and do the correct thing. And this leads then to spiritual development. And this is a lot what Steiner gets into also, that like our job as humans is to intellectualize this truth discovery process and then like turn it back into the spiritual development. Bring it back from, we came down to this material realm in order to have these epiphanies and revelations in the intellectual realm, to understand them intellectually, where beings in the past would just have these revelations automatically. Our significance is to put it through this process of discernment and to then develop through that way. So again, I see it as the fall of man into this material realm, and now the raising up back out of it, up into the higher realms. And this may be a wave that continues. These may be different eons that we go through in the cycle. The flat earth psyop. Just because it's a psyop doesn't mean it's not true. A psyop is there to divide us. And, clearly they have us arguing about this small aspect of this issue. Is it flat or is it a sphere? Those two terms are problematic anyway. But again, just because it's a psyop doesn't mean it's not true. And in a lot of cases, both sides of the psyop, both sides of the dialectic they give you are not true. And in this case, I think that's absolutely the case. There's problems with the modern cosmological model, and there's problems with the flat earth model that they give us. And we need to work to find the meaning of what's really going on here. That's part of the ending and the main point of this presentation. Crow 777 radio is something I would point to for people. Here's a man who said, I'm not going to listen to what the modern people are telling me. I'm going to go look for myself. He got himself a telescope. He went and looked at the sky, and he will tell you in a very rational way that what we've been told is wrong. And he's discovered things about the moon that we were never told. He's showing you things that NASA won't show you, and he's not the only one doing it. I'm pointing to him because if you go to that content, you can find what he's talking about and other people who are doing the same things, and the importance of us being in this time where we have the technology to look at these things ourselves and solve these problems ourselves. This is important for us to engage in. The foundation is morality, but we move into rediscovering what has been hidden from us. So now I want to talk about contemplating cosmologies. Here's an image of Hindu cosmology, where the plane in the middle is where we are, and there's spiritual realms above us and spiritual realms below us. And ultimately, we're encapsulated in some sort of egg, universal egg. And as you see outside of the eggs, there's other universes. So they believed that we weren't the only universe. There were other universes that existed outside of us. Buddhist cosmology, what I find interesting here, again, you see the higher spiritual realms. In Buddhism, they teach to, meditate and raise yourself up to the higher realms, highest realms, and sort of be able to look down on the absolute reality, the manifested reality, all the different aspects of reality. And so I also find interesting about this that this has now blocked out the higher realms or the multiple universes. It's sort of brought us down to our realm, right? And obviously Buddhism is connected to Hinduism because Buddha was a Hindu, and but it makes sense that they would have a similar cosmology. But you've got the lower realms, the hells, and you have us there in the middle realm. Norse cosmology has us in Midgard, in the middle realm, with 9 realms around us. Sumerian cosmology, the world of Sumerians is like an inverted plate in a salty ocean. Below this plate lie the hell called Kur by Sumerians. Above the plate are the arched roofs of heaven. The whole system is embedded in a freshwater ocean. Rain comes from this freshwater ocean by opening doors in the vaults of heaven. Egyptian cosmology. Hebraic cosmology. Now a shift happens. They start looking at it as rings surrounding the earth, right? But they still had a concept that these were spiritual realms, right? And they all represented certain things. This is, where a lot of our astrology and astrology comes from, right? That these are spiritual entities that are out there, right? There is Tycho Brahe. Now, if you listen to Crow 777, he talks very highly of Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe, he has a system in place where the Earth is in the center, the sun circles the Earth, but the sun also has planets that circle it. So there's actually 2 separate systems going on here. And, Kepler was actually a student of Tycho. Tycho Brahe, he never really went against what Tycho said, but then eventually, ended up pushing the Copernican model, which we have now, which puts the sun in the middle, puts the planets outside of that. And again, this is the modern physical cosmology that we have today, which, or we are told, is the right answer, and there is no other reason to look at any of the other ones. This is from a website called Tycho's, which is kind of delving into the Tycho model and actually elaborating on it. I'm going to read, quote, "It can hardly be denied that the Copernican model is marred by a number of problems which, objectively speaking, challenge the limits of our human senses and perceptions. To my mind, there is nothing intuitive about the Copernican theory. Even if you disagree, I think it is safe to say that the current widespread acceptance of it relies on the faith that most people have conferred to those prominent scientists who, about 4 centuries ago, decided for every one of us that it was not only a credible theory of our universe, but that it was indeed the definitive one. Paradoxically, the so-called Copernican revolution was hailed as the triumph of the scientific method over religious dogma. Yet, when challenged by the likes of Tycho Brahe about the absurd distances and titanic sizes of the stars that the novel Copernican model's tenets implied, the proponents of the same invoked the omnipotence of God." Quote, "Tycho Brahe, the most prominent and accomplished astronomer of his era, made measurements of the apparent sizes of the sun, moon, stars, and planets. From these, he showed that within a geocentric cosmos, these bodies were of comparable sizes, with the sun being the largest body and the moon the smallest. He further showed that within a heliocentric cosmos, the stars had to be absurdly large, with the smallest star dwarfing even the sun. Various Copernicans responded to this issue of observation and geometry by appealing to the power of God. They argued that giant stars were not absurd because even such giant objects were nothing compared to an infinite God, and that, in fact, the Copernican stars pointed out the power of God to humankind. Tycho rejected this argument." And this was regarding how Tycho Brahe noted the absurdity of the Copernican theory regarding the bigness of stars by Christopher M. Graney. Here, Native American cosmology. Artist's interpretation of Southeastern Native cosmology shows the tripartite division of the world. The axis mundi is depicted as a tree or post connecting the fire symbol of this world, the sun symbol of the upper world, and the swastika symbol of the lower world. Drawing by Jack Johnson, reproduced by permission, with permission of F. Kent Riley. Finally, I do have a quote here from Rudolf Steiner that before I read, I want to just say that regardless of what your idea is about what flat or spinning globe or whatever, or you think that it doesn't matter, I just find it interesting that in a community that wants to look at the Trivium and occult information and what these ancient people believed, that we just simply poo-poo these ideas that they had and disregard these ideas that they had, and we don't even take into account the significance of what they are. I mean, me as a kid growing up and believing in the Copernican model that I was told, I never, I was just told, oh yeah, they used to think it was flat. I never really thought of what that meant. And if I did think of it, I probably did think in my mind of a floating disk in space, but that's clearly not the model that they had. And it is of value for us to look at that. I am dealing with a 5-year-old son who is obsessed through media with the Copernican model and the planets. And to me, I think the important thing to do is to teach him multiple models and let him decide on his own. We talk about the problem with the school system. We let these kids walk into a kindergarten classroom and we tell them this is how it is. And we don't even let them investigate it on their own, when we're living in a time where, like people like Crow 777, you can go out there and investigate this stuff on your own. And as you look through history, none of these people completely agreed with each other. Even before Tycho Brahe and Copernicus, there were other people who had models which were slightly different of what was going on up there. So I think that, again, starting from a place of morality and natural law and using that as the foundation. Now is the time, which it's already happening. We need to continue searching and rediscovering what we've been lied to about. And we're in a time with access to technology where we can look at these. And, something about Crow 777 I just wanted to say is like, he's talking about shooting the sun, and that he's getting indication that there's some other object up there by the sun, and that potentially it is some type of binary system, and it may be some type of second sun. Now, think about that in terms of the flat earth debate. You think that if someone comes through and proves with photo evidence that there's a second sun, I mean, that's going to flatten people and destroy their idea of what they thought is true. So I just want, everyone to keep that in mind. Again, the flat earth psyop is to keep us down here in this conversation, not even getting up here into like, what is the cosmology? What are the spiritual realms? What does Mercury represent? And I know in astrology people get into that, but we need to embrace it as like, these are actual spiritual entities that have an effect on us, and we can intellectualize it and say it's a principle. It's the same thing. We could say it's a principle that's affecting us, or you can look at it as, animize it and look at it as an actual entity. Back in the day, they just saw these things as entities. Now we've sort of moved away again from the spirit and down into the material realm. So we've intellectualized it. And so one thing I wanted to say too, I know I'm over my time a little bit, is that all of these scientism theories, if you look at them, they all have a connection to occult. They have occult underpinnings, right? So the Big Bang Theory, I mean, it's the same creation story. It's just some kind of nothingness, and it just explodes into everything, right? So the theory of evolution, right? I mean, they make it a biological evolution, but in reality, if you look at Steiner, there's a longer evolution going on. We were on the sun at one point, and then we went into the moon phase, and then we went into the earth phase, and I may be out of order with that. But again, that idea of evolution already existed in the occult, right? Freud's ideas were already in the occult. Freud's ideas are pretty much based on like a trivium type of concept, ego, id, ego, and superego, so it's like, and even like when I did study Buddhism, I was like, oh, the Buddhists were already talking about this years before Freud made it mainstream and made it intellectual and made it material, right? So don't disregard the modern scientific theories either. They say that Isaac Newton, he was an occultist, and he actually had beliefs about the sun causing gravity, right? But like then he ended up putting out his theory that ultimately supported the globe theory, and the idea of like, if you look at that theory as an attempt of them to obfuscate the reality of what was going on, then all of the theories that came back after that kind of supported that. And it also kind of gave credence to what science was doing, that they were actually discovering something about the universe that wasn't already understood by the occult. So that's my last little rant. And I did want to read this last quote from Rudolf Steiner. When one speaks of the Copernican and of the Ptolemaic systems, one must have it clear in one's mind that in the Ptolemaic system, something still remains of the constellation of ruling spirits, and there the earth must be taken as the starting point of the perspective. A future will come when this world system will again be the correct one, because man will again know about the spiritual world. It is to be hoped that men will be then less fanatical than they are today. Today, it is said, before Copernicus, people all talked nonsense. They all had a primitive world system. Since Copernicus, we at last know what is right. All else is false, and because the Copernican system is the right one, it will be taught in all ages, even if it were for millions of years. This is more or less the talk of the day. And Rudolf Steiner's day was about 100 years ago. There hardly ever existed such superstitious folk as are the modern astronomical theorists, and there hardly ever was such fanaticism as there is in this domain of science. It is to be hoped that future generations will be more tolerant, and that they will say, from the 15th or 16th century, men ceased to be conscious of the existence of the spiritual world, and that one must have other perspectives in the spiritual worlds, that there one must arrange the heavenly bodies into a different order than when one observes in a merely physical way. So, I implore you to delve deeper into the spiritual world, delve deeper into these conversations, have these conversations in a rational, well thought out way, using the trivium, using debate, and let's move forward with not only promoting rights and freedoms and natural law, but we have to continue to build and to uncover what it was that we were lied to about and what it is that we actually are, to be able to look out at this entity that we call the universe, the world egg, and see it for what it is. There was a time when we could see it, and we've fallen to a point where we can't see it anymore because of this scientism, because of this material realm. So it is a balance. I'm not rejecting the material realm. I'm just encouraging more of a push into the spiritual realm, into the consideration of what in the cosmos is going on. Thank you for listening. Sorry I went 6 minutes over to my other organizer friends. Thanks to all the other presenters who are doing such a great job today. And I will see you all very soon.